Yes, yes, yes. This is Yadon Ben Chayil Ben Kush here, Rasiadonis Rastafari. Following up on a Tomb Herukuti's response. Yes, the Amharic, right, the Ethiopic proves, right, Moses is a real person, and the fictional character aspect vis-a-vis TEHUTI, vis-a-vis TEHUTI. Tehut, as we pointed out in our previous vlog, it's a real word that comes from a real root. We can get to the real root, and it still is used to communicate various layers of idea. Also, we have names that come from the primary, but this is a linguistic point that a lot of our people don't really have, and the pro-black community doesn't have the linguistic grasp that they should, right? The linguistic grasp. It goes back to how to make a slave and what happened there. They have isolated, you could say, research of others that might or might not have had a better grasp of them, but they don't really have a mastery of the tools themselves, right? The mastery of the tools themselves. Yeah, so it's a misunderstanding that our brother Tomb Herukuti and others, right, as well as a misattribution, right? At least give I LOJ, the Lion of Judah, and I, Rasiadonis, right, Adonis, give us credit, for bringing this forward, at least into the conscious, because there's more that we're going to bring forward, whether you give us credit for it or not, right? Because the history, the truth will bear witness to the truth, right? Here in this particular verse right here, it's the one that says 12:3. Let's zoom in as best as we can. Zoom in where it says Musaim b'midralai kalut sawoch hulu, and Moses, the head of the fraternal order of the Levites, from all of the men, the sawoch, the soul, right, that are upon the earth, the earthly plane, yilik, very much ijig, right, very much tehut so. Tehut means humble, right? Tehut means humble in the Amharic, a humble, right, like one who has humility, right? Tehut sau, so means man, nebre. Now, why is this important? Because if you look in Wallace Budge's what is it called, hieroglyphic dictionary, we have that here. We might just need to bring that up right here when it talks about so, and it talks about man, and then it talks about in ancient Egypt as sa in ancient Egypt, which is, if you understand linguistics, then there are larger forms that get contracted and simplified over time, right? We can see this with linguistics, with even nowadays on social media. There's the way that we communicate in little bits and bytes, not full sentences, almost like hieroglyphs, so to speak now. But it didn't begin like this. It actually began from the longer forms. So when we look at the word sau, right? So is man, right? So is man. And Wallace Budge and others, when they discovered the Ethiopic and Amharic link with things, they recognized this was an important tool that many of the real linguistic scholars have used. Some have given more credit, some have given less credit, right? Just like many of y'all will seek to discredit the fact that it's I, right, Rasiadonis and the RastafariJews, and that we are putting this forward, right? Whether you agree fully with our perspective or reasoning or not, at least give good credit and due credit. It's a shame because it's only sometimes some of the Europeans or white folks that will give even sometimes, rarely, but even sometimes, black people credit, but we don't do this for ourselves, right? And yeah, credit is very important for the historical record, because then later on people will pretend like we never existed, like we didn't exist, like they just got this out of the blue, right? But here we have Tehut. Right, here we have Tehut. Here, let's go over here. Tehut. Right, here we have Tehut. Tehut is a real word that's used to describe real people. Let me say that, because to the brother's comment, Amharic just proved Moses is a fictional character. No, the Amharic didn't prove that Moses is a fictional character. The Amharic, His Majesty's Bible, just proved, right, that the biblical narrative, right, is true from a different and the original perspective. not from this Western Gentile perspective, right? Because see, a lot of y'all are arguing with the whitewash racism and white supremacy, and then those of us who are seeking to get to the roots of the matter, you're trying to pretend that we are defending white racism and white supremacy, and that what we're putting forward, white racism and white supremacy, have never put this forward, right? This has never come forward. The Tehut connection with Moses has never come forward. Now there's ones and ones that want to run off of it. This is good, right? Run off of it. But brothers and sisters, let's run off of this too as well. You know, we need some transcribers. Anybody out there is a transcriber? Hit the contact at lojs.org. lojs.org, or shoot I an email at RastafariJews@gmail.com. We need transcribers, one that can help transcribe, because we need to put this into print. We need to write this on the wall too. You know, engrave this in concrete, engrave this in geopolymer stone. You know what I mean? We need to engrave these things as well. You know, but Tehut is real, right? Tehut. I sister wife, her name is Tehitana. It means humility, to be humble, right? It's both a name of persons, right? It's a name of persons, of real people, right? But it's also an abstract. See, I don't know if you know anything about the Metunet or the Ryan Komet, you know, the language of the people, the language of Kemet, you know, because if you know, they are determiners, right? Determinatives, right? And determiners that are basically used. And there's even the abstract. This is an abstract idea. So even the ancients understood that some things is speaking about animals, something is speaking about men, woman, plants, and other things are more abstract ideas. So Tehut, right? Tehut, a man can be named Tehut, right? You can have a child and we name our child Tehut. Others might say Tut. See, Tut is a contraction of Tehut. Tut is a contraction of Tehut, right? But that shows that Tehut is the original and Tut is a derivative. So much of ancient Egyptian language is actually, the ancient language is a derivative, right? Is a derivative of the ancient Tobian and Tobia. And in Africa, we say Ethiopian, right? And the Tigra, Kala, Giz, you know, root languages and linguistics, like our brother Legacy Allen. Legacy Allen, check out his work, right, on Amharic and Tigrinya decipherment, where he really goes into the linguistics and really shows and prove, right, the other half of the story. What we're showing and seeking to prove here is not that Moses is just a fictional character. You know, we're talking about abstract terms. You know, like if I say, you know, I'm the God, you know, or he's the Rasta G, right? We use these ideas to say Rasta God. Am I really the God? Or we are using an abstract term to refer to attributes of a physical person that goes beyond just the 5-cycle realm of reality, the 5-cycle realm of consciousness. But see, with a calcified pineal gland, one cannot understand these fine, you know, these fine levels of abstract conceptions. People, many of us, are too easy to get caught up on this, like this kind of bipolar, right? Bipolarness of the Western Gentile. See, the Western white people either like to say something is real or unreal, right? And don't even recognize that the so-called unreal or the fictional, right, exists within the real, and the fictional is even created for real purposes by the real. This is what we need to recognize, and not to look at the fact that, like, if somebody says, like, I was thinking something, I say fiction. So what you mean? I was thinking something. Oh, that's fiction. You wasn't thinking nothing. You don't know what I was thinking was in my head, and the person is right. I don't know what they was thinking in their head, but because I can't see it, I can always call it not real, fiction. Now, until they manifest what they were thinking, you know, like we say, manifest your thought. Because sometimes I hear what you're saying, but I need an object lesson. So what the Amharic was proving here, this is the first part. We got more. This is the first part of it. We want to see how ones and ones handle this right here. And I'm already seeing that there's a potential mishandling, right, of this truth. You know, the truth is like, you know, like a fire. You know, people can use the fire responsibly, or they can burn themselves. And like the old timers used to say, you know, don't play with fire. right? This is fire here. Tehut is an adjective, as an adjective here, right? It's used to describe what sort of a man Moshe was. Now, in our reasoning, we were making the connections with ancient Mitzrayim and ancient Egypt of the time and the period. Not only are we saying that the Israelites and the Hebrews were there in ancient Mitzrayim, as the scripture and as other archaeological evidence points to. It's many of the Europeans, right? It's many of the secular Europeans that try to dismiss any biblical scriptural relevancy, right? And then it's many of the other Europeans that are like the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant religious fanatics that sometimes like to use any little feeble thing to try to prove it. A lot of it that has been disproven. But Tehut is real, right? It's a real word to describe an abstract idea. But get this right here. A lot of people don't really understand abstract ideas. This is one of the things, as we've been studying the hieroglyphs and learning to read the language even much better, because, you know, we're into linguistics and everything like that, and we have a strength in Ethiopic and in Amharic and the Hebrew. We need to get a strength also, or strengthen our strength in the ancient Egyptian. It's also proven that a lot of the abstract ideas, like people say, a lot of the hieroglyphs and engraving was on columns and in temples mainly, right? And there was inner writings in temples that only like the kings and the higher officials and the nomarchs and the priests were able to see, that many of the common people, right? I heard this from ancient, you know, Kemetic teachers myself years ago, that the hieroglyphs were more like graffiti in places like Ethiopia, right, where they had more of a comprehension of writing than it was for the average people in down the Nile, in the Nile Valley. So there are Kemetic teachers that also can verify that the real origin, there's a whole big half of the story we have not got into, because most of us have not got into it. But we're at a point, at a cusp right here, where this conversation that we're having back and forth, and Tum Herukuti, you're a part of this conversation. That's why this is like the second video that I did, just to respond to some of what you have said, right? Because this is the sort of response, even though we, as we said, we thank you for your comment, we agree with your perspective, but not your conclusion. It's a fine line between fiction and reality. For example, even the name that you used for your avatar, is that fictional? Are you a fictional character? Now, we said it's not as an insult, but some, you know, the truth is an offense, but it's not a lie. So the truth might be offensive. You know, somebody might take offense at this. I don't know whether the brother thought we would take offense. No, we actually embrace what you've said right here, because this gives us an opportunity. This is now like a teachable moment. This is now an objective lesson moment right here. You know, where we can really get into the narrative, right? And really understand the correspondence. Because if it's like a lot of the people say concerning ancient Egypt and the Hebrews, right? This would almost mean, right? This would almost, you can see the root of the word right here. This will almost mean, right, that Moses and them had all access into ancient Egypt on all levels, right? And we should know that this was not really even so much possible. And then even with the access that he had on all these levels, right, for him or them to write this, right, as one say, right, also in effect proves that they must have been there. Because if you notice, most of the world did not even know these things that we know now. After more than 2,000 years, almost 2,000 years, we're just beginning to scratch at the surface of these things. So that means that the Hebrew and the Hebrew Bible writers and the Torah writers and Moshe and the scribes or whoever, they knew of these things way back before anyone, and they were able, according to some, to adapt, to copy, to do this and that, and create their own narrative. So you can't say that they was not in Egypt. You understand the point? Because some would say, well, the Hebrews, what's the proof that the Hebrews were in Egypt? All this that we be talking about, all this that the others who even are against the Bible and narrative, what they're talking about also proves it too. Because they and others would not have known what they now know because it was not rediscovered, deciphered until fairly recently. So how did the ancient Hebrews decipher all of this? Know what was all written in the inner recesses of people's tombs. Remember, a lot of the tombs during the time of Moshe, right? A lot of the tombs during the time of Moses were closed up, right? A lot of the tombs in the time of Moses, they were sealed. Remember, the time of Moses, we place this roughly around the 18th, right? Roughly around the 18th dynasty, the time of Moshe and the Israelites and the Exodus, we can say the 1400s, like 1440, 1400s, right? Now, this means that all the older tombs of the other ones, right, that had, remember, let's say there were 17 dynasty, Paro, great houses before. And what now they have discovered or really desecrated. Now, I don't hear none of you pro-Kemetics talking about the desecration. It's like you see a thief and you consent with the thief. It's those people who have desecrated the ancient Egyptians' reality or their fiction. Depends on how you look at it. But most of those tombs and everything was sealed up for a long time. You know what I'm saying? So where did Moses and the rest of them know these things? So you see, they basically have gotten themselves into a, what is that called again? Yeah. An indefensible. They've gotten themselves into an indefensible position, a position they cannot defend. Okay, Rastafari Israelites beginning right here. You can see it coming up on the screen. Check it out. YouTube's Rastafari Israelites, an indefensible position. Even when they say, well, David and the Psalms of David, these were taken from ancient Egypt. That means that if it to be taken allegedly from ancient Egypt, they must have been in ancient Egypt. You get it? You get that right there, right? But here's the real thing. The real thing about the Hebrews and the Israelites and the Mitzrayim, that the Hebrews and we as the Hebrews, the Beta Israel, we can think for ourselves. See, here's the main thing. We could think for ourselves. And yes, we were there. Of course we were there. Yes, we were influenced, like we're influenced by all these different denominations of whitewashed Christianity. It's like ancient Egypt religion. They got different nomes, different nomarchs, different mega preachers and pastors, Protestant, Catholic, Methodist, this and that. They all speak about the same thing, but it's not the same. This one talk about Christ like this. This one talk about Christ like that. This one believe that Christ's relationship with his mother is this. The other one believe is that. It's like ancient Egypt, man. It's what the scripture in Revelation says, what it says, because we can think for ourselves. But see, what they have got themselves into is an indefensible position, right? Both claims, if you're claiming that, well, this was stolen from ancient Egypt, right, or plagiarized or what have you, and we know that most of this archives that they have discovered and translated were found in one's tombs, right? Tombs that were sealed were in one's tombs, right, and other temples and under the ground. And one thing you know is that we Hebrews, we wasn't digging up and breaking into people's tombs to try to find out about their spirituality. You know what I'm saying? On that particular level. It was a white man that did that. And the real black conscious Kemetic community should be talking about the desecration. What is the effect of the desecration of the tombs of the ancestors? But you know what I recognize? A lot of y'all are just using this whole rhetoric as something you can wave in the white man's face to say, look, black people. It's not because of a real love of the essence. It's not for like a love of truth. A scholar is about the love of truth, wherever the truth leads I and I. This is why we can take on this sort of a point, right? Oh, you say fiction? No, the Amharic actually, not just fiction, but the reality and fiction. Because fiction is made by who? Who is fiction made by? Right? Who is fiction made by? Real people. Now, we already went into what fiction is, right, a little earlier in the next video. We might put this one out because it's a little more live and direct to the point. But they are painting themselves into an indefensible position. They're trying to say that, well, all of the Bible was taken out of Egypt, or it was plagiarized, or whatever else, like those, that was even a law, that was a thing back then, right? We can ask ourselves, how much did the ancient Egyptians take from others, since it was many different cultures and people who came together to form that ancient society and system of things. Right? And we know how they brought a lot of things together syncretically and merged a lot of concepts, right, together in ancient Egypt. It's what people do with what they believe in, what they accept for themselves as true. But the point that really is more disturbing is not what people are saying about Moses, but what many people who are pro-Egyptian or pro-ancient Kemet, right, are actually saying about ancient Egypt and ancient Kemet. When it really comes down to it, they really think it was fiction. And therefore, they don't recognize that the ancient Egyptians actually believed in what they believed in, right? The ancient Egyptians actually believed in what they believed in, right? They actually believed in the afterlife. They spent most of their life preparing for death, especially amongst the kings and the nomarchs, you know, and the royalty or the nobility, right? Then it came down to the common people, and it became like a kind of religious fad, a tradition. Everybody had to have a big outstanding funeral, like back in the days in Brooklyn, here in Brooklyn, when they had Big E's funeral. That was a big thing, right? That was like a big celebration. The first thing it reminded me of, right, and I witnessed parts of that occurred back when Big E got shot and killed, and they had the whole funeral thing. It reminded me of Egypt. It reminded me how black people is all about how you go. Oh, he had a wonderful ceremony, you know, like, yeah, he's looking down on us and so forth and so on. Is that real or is that fiction? Now it depends on your belief, right? But is that real or is that fiction, right? Is that real or is that fiction? So they're painting themselves into an indefensible position, right? And then what they are saying about ancient Egypt to disprove the Bible, they basically are also dismissing and disproving, and in a sense, they are desecrating. A lot of the pro-Kemetic scholars are desecrating ancient Egypt. Although they was not the ones to break into the tombs, rob and steal and loot and everything, they are desecrating because they are basically siding with those who did desecrate the tombs, invade and rape and rob, and then put out their version, right, based on what white people see. A lot of white scholars that basically say, well, ancient Egypt is the beginning of all these religious ideas. They were battling against their own religious zealots, you know, white religious zealots, white religious fanatics. You know what I mean? That's what they were battling against. Like ones like Gerald Macy, you know, Gerald Macy, right? So here. So basically, they're doing more harm to themselves. You know, they're doing more harm to themselves than good, right? And we're just showing you some of the historical pictures. People may want to dismiss it, but we find a lot of real history. So how would if they went into the captivity and the Babylonians testified to the captivity of Yehuda and Judah, right, roughly around like 500, you know, BC, did all of a sudden the Israelites just pop up and appear? That's like 500 years after Solomon's temple, right? So that proves that can a people just come out of nowhere? Has that happened? That's a fiction there. That's a fiction they would like to believe, right? But basically, we're not fighting, you know, with our own brothers and sisters, even though sometimes we have to fight against the white lies, right? The white lies that they have in their hearts and minds. You know what I mean? But this is all real world, right? What happened to us then, what's happened to us now. Here. You already saw the prompt right here for the podcast and the broadcast. So we have to get up there and get there. So on fiction right there, let me just do this right here and put this here. Legal, right? Legal fiction, right? Legal fiction. Let's go right there. Legal fiction. What is legal fiction? It's an assertion accepted as true, though probably fictitious, to achieve a particular goal in a legal matter, in a legal or lawful matter. So yes, Moshe, the real person, right, by the power of Yahweh HaKadosh Baruch Hashem, right, was enabled to produce that TEHUTI, right, legal fiction there to produce, right, a particular goal. And that particular goal was the Exodus, the movement of Jah people. Yes. So we as Hebrews must take example from the ancient Hebrews of the narrative of the book of the scripts. And we got to think for ourselves. You know what I mean? Take the best of what works for us, you know what I mean? And move forward and liberate and free ourselves, right? Every other people do it for themselves. And this is what makes the biblical scriptural narrative so controversial. You know what I mean? Because the world flesh, the satanic seclorum, right? The satanic seclorum, they recognize, where we're at in this particular event horizon. But the Hebrews and the Israelites, they couldn't just, according to some allegations, take from ancient Egypt without being in ancient Egypt, especially when we recognize that these things wasn't just like written on billboards down the streets in ancient Egypt, but they were contained in people's tombs, right? Tombs from hundreds and thousands of years before the historical time of the Israelites in Egypt, right? So any similarities, right, is strictly coincidental, right? Any similarities is strictly coincidental. Moshe, right, is a real person, and real people can invent things, right? Can develop things. We do it all the time. We invent things. We make inventions. We create things based on thoughts and ideas that we see in our mind. We manifest what we and we alone can see in our mind's eye in a way that everyone else can see it and manifest it. So the Amharic, right, basically proves the truth, right? The Amharic proves that Moses was real, ... and a fictional character. And as one further point, for those who like to focus on Moshe's name and say, well, this came from ancient Egypt and so forth and so on, we want to put this on the record that, well, ancient Egyptian linguistics came from Tobia, came from Ethiopia. So if one's not giving Egypt credit that it should be given, which it should be given credit for what it should and deserves credit for, then moreover, a lot of the black scholars are not doing due diligence to get the tools so that we can get to the root, right, of this particular matter, right? And remember, Moshe's Ethiopian wife, that right there proves even more of the truth of the matter. Because we now study these things, we can see the correspondence of these things and really see that Tobia and Ethiopia is really at the root, as we mentioned before, not just of the Nile Valley civilization, right, but the Tigris-Euphrates Valley civilization, right, and the true, right, we say Hebrew, the true Hebrew culture. We of the royal order of the Ethiopian Hebrews after the order of Melchizedek, the righteous king, even the King of Kings. Shalom, Chaverim, shalom. Lehitarot. Check us out, Rastafari Israelites, about to begin right now the podcast. Try to put up this vlog and also the next vlog soon. We need some transcribers, one who can transcribe like audibles and like some videos, who can transcribe for us. Link us at lojs.org. Hit the contact there, lojs.org. Also, one can shoot an email at RastafariJews at gmail.com. If I didn't put that there in the description, we're going to update the description and everything. But RastafariJews, like the name on the channel here, at gmail.com. We're looking for transcribers, ones that can do some transcripts, because we also need to publish more. We do a lot of video vlogs and the podcast audibles, but many have been saying how those things need to be put in book form and also supplemented with additional facts and evidence that we have to supplement. So looking forward to co-laborers, any co-laborers out there that can help and assist with transcription. The scribes, because we say who wrote about Moses' death? Well, Moshe, the head of a fraternal order, it was those who were the scribes who were of that order. It's an order here, it's an order here. And if ones want to base Moses' so-called unreality on a name, well, what name do you use? It's interesting, a lot of folks be using all these other names, these kind of fictional fake names, but many of these fictional fake names, notice how people use it with more joie de vie, joy of life, than their own so-called real names. And even their own real names is basically somebody else's name that's been passed down, right? Most of it's not tribal names, or has any significance, in that sense, in the indigenous sense, especially us in this Western Gentile hemisphere. So it's really ironic that ones will go around in social media with these conscious names, fictional conscious names, right? And yet will still go around, on the other hand, in the so-called, quote, real world with their Babylonian names. So who's really dealing with the fakery or the fookery? Truth is an offense, not a sin. Shalom, Chaverim.